Hello, I'm Tim Harris. This is Julie Harris, and this is Real Estate Coaching Radio.
That's right. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for popping by. Hit that like button, and don't forget to leave your comments and questions so we can get right back with you.
We will. Thank you for continuing to make our podcast, Real Estate Coaching Radio, the #1 listened to podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. And let us know what you think about this video. Leave your comments below. Thank you.
3, 2, 1, and we are back. And this is part 2. We are talking about how to negotiate on behalf of your buyers and sellers in this market. Before we get to part 2 and the next point, we have been receiving, or I have received, Julie, a lot of comments, especially over on Instagram at Tim and Julie Harris, where people are asking about being in your private coaching schedule. And I'll tell you guys what we said a couple weeks ago. Julie does have very, very limited scheduling ability. That's just the bottom line. And she's very picky. I'm speaking on your behalf. You are.
Yes, it's true.
And so here's the process. If you're interested in being personally coached by Julie, you've got to text me, and I'm essentially pre-qualifying everyone. So just text me at 512-758-0206. And when you do, I will ask you, well, actually do me a favor and give me a profile. Let me know about yourself. If you got a family, your business, how long you've been in the business, homes you've sold, all the rest of it. Let me know about what your background is. And then we'll have a little back and forth. And in some cases, we won't. I'll just know you're a perfect candidate for Julie. And then you'll talk with Julie. And then guess what? You're going to pre-qualify Julie, and she's going to pre-qualify you. And assuming that you guys are a great coach-client match, then you're going to be in Julie's schedule. So that's the way it works. So text me directly at 512-758-0206. And also, I want to thank all of you, and we do sincerely appreciate this, all of you who've given us 5-star reviews on iTunes, especially those of you who've told your personal stories about what you've learned, how you've benefited. It means a ton to us to read. It motivates us, frankly. This topic, by the way, for this week was inspired by some of the comments on iTunes. So we do listen, we do pay attention. Yes, there are tens of thousands of you that listen every single day. Yes, there are literally tens of millions of you who have downloaded this podcast. But this podcast, along with, frankly, our coaching business, is highly personal to Julie and I. This business is our first baby.
It is.
Zoe, though, and I think she knows it.
Yes.
She's our real baby, obviously. Mm-hmm. But this business has been something Julie and I have, we've done together for decades. And so we take it very seriously, and we appreciate the fact that you guys are now really seeing the difference between a real coach and a fake coach. And Julie and I are not ones to mince words, and that is the reality. And some of you have learned that the hard way. That unfortunately there is an enormous difference. I was thinking about this, Julie, actually. We should have, you talk sometimes about the landing of planes, but, I was thinking about how important it is to how do I frame this out? If you guys are trying to shoot an arrow downfield at a target and you're trying to basically make sure you hit bullseye, if you're off, and you know this, if you're off before you even release the arrow by just a millimeter, by the time that arrow reaches down target between the pull of gravity and the wind direction and the arrow itself and all the rest of these, things, your arrow could completely miss the target, end up maybe even many feet away. And that's unfortunately what a lot of you have done in your businesses with the people you've been listening to. And, the gurus that you thought were legitimate, now you're discovering they aren't. And here's unfortunately what's going to happen. You are that arrow. You're traveling downfield. You're headed to that target. You can kind of see that you're not on target, but you have not yet given yourself permission to actually be re-aimed so you can actually hit target. Maybe the decision you made in the past to do whatever you were doing to build your real estate business worked in the previous market. Maybe it didn't. It doesn't matter. What the point is now is you have to be back in alignment. Otherwise, you're going to completely miss the target. And there's so many things, unfortunate things in life that your health, your relationships with other people, all these tiny little you're just off by a tiny little degree here or a degree there. The accumulation effect of being in that, being misdirected over a period of time can ruin, frankly, all your possibilities, can ruin health, can ruin relationships, can ruin your business potential, can ruin your wealth building. So you've got to be incredibly selective in who you listen to and just trust your intuition. And one of the things Julie and I always say, because it is true, is when you hear Julie and I say something that you like kind of recoil over, and I know it happens because you guys tell us what those things are in comments. Like when we ask you to do something and you think to yourself, ooh, I'll never do that. Guess what? That's the very damn thing you should be doing, and intuitively you know it. So the old saying is, whatever you're resisting the most is where your growth needs to be. That's the point of this podcast. And we adore the fact that you guys, so many of you, understand that. And maybe you need to give yourselves permission to forgive yourselves for being off direction or off course for as long as you have. You're back on course now. Stay drilled down, stay focused, and thanks for all the 5-star reviews and the pithy comments on iTunes. Like I said, we do read them, and there's your evidence because I've just sort of encompassed a whole bunch of them. And yes, it is your opportunity to give Julie and I a belated birthday present. This month, we have a combined age of 105. Or is it 4? Hold on, let me think. Oh, crap, it is 105.
In realtor years, or at least 1,000.
Well, you combine our ages together.
Yes, I know. That's
now,
true.
I'm not going to say how old you are.
No.
No, we're not saying that.
We'll just say more of the years fall on your side.
That's, well, more of the year.
No. Too many clues. Okay, so back to our series on negotiating. And this is a 4-part series, plus some bonus points, I'm sure, along the way. So this is day 2, part 2. What do you know about the seller's priorities? Yesterday we talked about the house, the subject property. Today is all about the seller. Knowledge equals confidence, ignorance equals fear. Remember that negotiating is reaching an acceptable agreement between parties who have different needs. Find out what's important to each party so that you can give and take on both sides in such a way that everyone feels satisfied. Now, these points are relevant for you if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent. Just keep in mind what you're able to disclose or not disclose, depending what side you're on, but ask good questions and take good notes. Now, Benjamin Franklin famously said, quote, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." So we hope that you are not failing in your negotiations, and this is part of your preparation to make sure that you succeed, knowing about your seller. So point number 1, what is the seller's motivation? Why are they moving? Do they want to move, or do they have to move, or have they already moved?
How do you know? You pre-qualify them. That's how you know. And you ask them the questions to know what their true motivation is. You have to understand that you're going to find 50% of the time the seller is not going to want to readily tell you what their motivation is.
That's right, but you have to get to the bottom of it because how they negotiate or their expectations is very different. So generally, a seller who has already bought their next home is more motivated than one who's only moving if they can get their price and hasn't even looked for a next property. Ask the listing agent if it's not you, the listing agent, and see what you can find out about the situation. Now, sometimes you can tell because the house is vacant.
This is a great place to interject. This is something you and I talked about the other day.
Yes.
Most of you, again, all of you basically, have only been in the business for 15 years or less. Something like 74% of all agents or something like that, according to NAR, have been in the business for 15 years or less. But here's the interesting thing to consider. If you have never been in the business for, during the time prior to the housing boom in 2007, you don't realize that people will sell and buy for normal reasons. People buy and sell because their houses, their families get bigger, or the houses get too big, or all these different,
situational things.
Right. Maybe they got relocated. Maybe they inherited the house. Maybe whatever reason they have to move. Humans will always move no matter what the interest rates are, no matter what the, political headwinds are, no matter what's going on with anything, they're always going to need to buy or sell real estate. Now, you've got to realize what a blessing that is to you because you happen to be selling something, dear listener, that everybody will need no matter what happens to the economy. Now, what does a tougher economy or rising interest rates or rising unemployment or all these it knocks out the marginally motivated seller or the marginally motivated buyer, but there'll always be people that have to buy and sell. When you go all the way back in time, you use NAR statistics to research all this, or the other one you're really liking on is what, Altos Research?
Yes.
And you go back in time and you start looking to see when these peaks of inflation go back from 1970, dear God. That's when one of us was born. 1970 to 1980, and that was during a really rough time in the economy. Lots of inflation, lots of reasons that people would believe real estate was going to crash.
And yet,
people bought and sold.
In fact, your parents and my parents both bought their houses during those very high inflationary times, way worse than it is now. And I think that they were paying definitely double digits. I think The highest the rates got then were something like very close to 18%.
That's right. 18% mortgages, which, by the way, as an aside, for those of you who are interested in investing, that also is 18% treasury bonds. And if you were smart enough to have gotten a long-term treasury bond at, say, even half that, you made a lot of money.
Yes. So there were still opportunities. They were just different ones. Now, here's some immediate homework for you listing agents out there. Do you know the motivation of all of the sellers whose listings you have active right now? If not, find out. Now, for obvious reasons, it'll help you with negotiating, but I'll tell you, as a coach, one of the obvious things that I see slipping through listing agents' fingers, when they have a seller relocating to another town or another state, they almost never ask about referring that out. There's like all these lost referral fees floating out there. So that's a different topic.
Well, but also, Julie, scale that, right? So if you have somebody that's downsizing out of their family house and their kids have all gone off to wherever they've gone, they might have other properties that they want to sell. There are a lot of people that were, essentially reluctant landlords. And in other words, they had properties that maybe were supposed to be vacation properties. And now that they're long-term rentals or the VRBOs or whatever, make sure you ask what else is for sale, because here's what happens if you don't, or what else they might want to sell. If you don't ask because you're being lazy, and then they list that with somebody else, you're going to be mad at them, whereas your fault for not asking.
That's right.
These are all part of our pre-qualification scripts. The whole point, once you proactively lead generate, you've got to you have to completely pre-qualify. You will find that we tell you guys this all the time, that for every listing, there are multiple transactions. And oftentimes that seller is going to be directly responsible for not just the sale of their property. That's one transaction. Maybe you double end it. That's two. The seller is going to buy something. That's three. You guys get the point? You've got to ask, but it all comes from being a listing agent. In this market right now is your best time to become listing agent, more so than any time, frankly, in almost the last, certainly 15 years.
Yes, absolutely. So point number 2, what is the seller's ideal closing and possession date? Do they have a specific time frame that's important to them? Do they need a lease back or a longer or shorter closing time frame? Are they building or relocating or have other concerns about how the timing will work out? This can really sway a negotiation. In fact, sometimes you can end up paying a little bit less than you thought if you satisfy something really specific that the seller is sensitive to.
And do not assume the seller has any clue how long a property is going to take to sell and close. Do not assume the seller is in any way competent with basically protecting their own best interests. So if you find, in our scripts, by the way, we give you 3 or 4 ways of finding out what the seller's motivation is. And here's a little advanced coaching for you. A lot of times, the sellers that are the most motivated will be the ones that are least likely to tell you their motivation. In other words, they're having some issue that's forcing the sale of the property.
True.
They're absolutely must-sell sellers, and they don't want you to know. And maybe they don't want you to know because they don't want you to know how motivated they are, or maybe they're embarrassed. It does not matter. You've got to know. That way you can set the expectation for how long. Like, say, for example, they have to sell the house in 4 months, but you do not know they have to sell the house in 4 months, and you do not price it accordingly. And then when month 3 ticks over and you're into the 4th month, that seller is going to fire you.
Yep.
For sure.
It's for their own good
Right.
that you know, right? So that creates some nuance and some skill you've got to have. Okay. Point number 3, what else besides price is important to the seller? Do they have a stainless steel fridge they just can't part with? Would they rather include all the furniture with the sale? They just don't feel like moving all of it? Or are they taking the hot tub and the pool table? Remember, it was like an endless supply. It's almost always single guys. Got to keep that stainless steel refrigerator and or the pool table and, all of those things.
But this is funny. Julie and I have had the fantasy of starting a business. Here are the things that no seller seems to want. They don't want their damn pool table.
Nope.
They rarely want their piano, especially if it's an upright. They'll be more than happy sometimes to leave their hot tub. Oh, they definitely don't want the hot tub.
Because who wants to move that?
Well,
How do you even move a hot tub?
you can't even clean the damn thing at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing they'll leave is the dining room set.
Yes.
So oftentimes you'll find yourself, if you ever wanted to have a little, side hustle, you could start essentially in a consignment store where you specialize in pools, hot tubs, dining room tables.
Well, we joke about that, but I actually have a coaching client who started a staging company on the side. And so sometimes it just depends. She's got different programs that she does, and she advertises her staging company independently of her real estate practice. And guess what kind of leads she gets? Listing leads.
That's awesome.
So there you go. Okay. Now, next is point number 4. Has the seller had other offers and perhaps turned them down?
Maybe even private offers. Maybe the property wasn't listed before. Maybe the seller has that's really important. It's all about pre-qual again. Find out if the seller had mentioned the house they're thinking about selling it and the neighbor's best friend is moving from Omaha. You got to find out if there's any side conversations going on like that. And if there are, you need to exclude them from the listing contract. That way you still get the listing.
That's right. And if there were offers turned down, well, what was wrong with those offers? What was the situation? How can you win this time? Or maybe they just have unrealistic expectations. Find out what happened if they had offers that didn't work out. Now, point number 5 has...
Julie,
yeah,
that's such an important point, and it was such a short point. Expireds, this is true.
True.
And a lot of FSBOs were formal expireds. Find out what's going on there. You really got to dig. You really got to pre-qualify. You really got to know. And again, this is about negotiating, right? Can you just, in your minds, listeners, can you imagine how much more confident you're going to feel representing your buyer or representing your seller when you know all the answers to these questions, opposed to versus having all this come out in a negotiation process? I mean, I remember like when we sold real estate, you had an appraisal. You've told this story before in the podcast. It wasn't an appraisal, it was an inspection. And there was a whole bunch of crap that came back on the inspection that the seller did not claim to have known about, did not put on their property disclosure form. And then you sent and by the way, we teach you guys how to negotiate property inspections too. That's a big part of Premier Coaching. And you sent the property inspection from the buyer's agent along with their remedy to request. And the seller, it was a lot. And the seller was like, you were expecting the seller to say hell to the no. And the seller not only said yes, but they laughed at it and said, well, at least they didn't find X. Remember that?
No, and you know what? That didn't happen just once. That happened several times. Well, at least they didn't find out about the cover your ears. You don't want to know because now you have to disclose, right?
Yes.
But, there is a coaching thing to that. And we did, I think, a few months back, we did something about dealing with home inspections because it was when it just started to crop up again, right? You guys get to have home inspections sometimes now and I remember when I learned this, I think maybe Rory taught us this. He said, when you get a long grocery list of something or you get a lowball offer, present it and shut up.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, okay, we'll try that, right? And we started doing that, and he was so right about that. It's not about you. It's not about what you would do. Present it and be quiet and see what they say. And you're right. Half the time on inspections, they'd be like, yeah, we knew about that. We'll take care of that.
And that's on the buyer-seller side. So again, if you guys are sweating home inspections, say you're on the listing side, take the unsatisfactory conditions report. Those of you who don't know what that is, that's basically where it's the buyer's hit list of all the things they want fixed on the property.
Request to remedy, they
exactly. Call it. Or they'll ask for a dollar amount and then get a copy of the actual inspection that the buyer's agent used. Send that to the seller and just say nothing. Like, do not contribute. Do not negotiate. Do not start acting like you're Bob Vila.
And don't act like you're all outraged that they asked either.
Exactly. Don't let your ego creep in. Oh, this is where I'm going to get to work. And shut up. Let the seller decide for themselves. You'll be shocked how frequently they knew all that crap was wrong and they were going to fix it anyway. And on the buyer agent side of things, same thing. Let the buyer decide what they want to ask for and write it up just however they want it written up. Do not make it so the process blows up just because you don't think that you're trying to over-negotiate the deal, basically.
That is a big mistake. And I see that happening very frequently now because they're not used to dealing with it. Okay. Point number 5, has the home been in contract previously and returned to active marketing? What caused that? Inspection, condition, appraisal, financing issues? If it was an inspection issue, were those things resolved or are we just going to go through that all over again?
One of the hacks for this, again, advanced coaching, is when you're taking a listing in this market, have it pre-inspected, then have all the things that were on the inspection corrected, show before and after pictures, show receipts of the work being done, leave said inspection with the evidence of the remedies being done on the countertop. When the buyer's agent brings the buyer into the house, they'll see all the inspections were done. If you get a seller that is reluctant to do that, what do you think the reason why the seller is reluctant to have it pre-inspected?
Why might that
Because
be?
they know the house is a house of horrors. And they don't want to have to fix all the things. You can explain to them the ramifications of not having it pre-inspected and having the work done ahead of time. Inevitably, it'll cost more. A leaky faucet that would cost 5 cents to fix, basically, in a buyer's mind with their home inspector and the buyer's agent, that's now $500.
Yeah, and that is a whole can of worms with the inspection thing, because my heart goes out to those of you who sell old and really old houses.
Like we did.
Oh my goodness. And even like in the East Coast where houses can be 300 years old out there, it's tough. But the pre-inspection I think is brilliant. And those of you who are freaking out going, well, what seller is going to pay a home inspector $500 to do that if they don't have to? Well, assuming you get the right home inspector, there are inspectors that whip through you, and this is a benefit you can offer to your sellers, will do a major system inspection. You don't have to do the whole shebang, but you should do the HVAC, the plumbing, the electric, all that kind of stuff.
All right, so when Julie and I were selling real estate, right, and we did sell real estate for 10 years, between 100 and 200 homes per year. So there was a property that came for sale, and this property it was beautiful. It was newer construction. It was a 2-story. It was like in this sort of, East Coasty type, Old Worthington, okay?
Yes.
All right, now here's the thing. You walked into this house and it was just perfect. Everything was great about it until you looked at the home inspection report. And it turns out there were, ready for it, wait for it, oh, here it comes, dead bodies in the backyard. Now, let me be very specific what those dead bodies were. It wasn't just an old graveyard. It was a graveyard of people who had like 100 years or so prior died of, what was it, the Black Plague or something?
Something nasty.
And the bodies...
It was the Spanish flu. I don't know. It was
Whatever.
something yucky.
It was something, but no, it wasn't the Spanish flu. It was something worse than that.
Yeah.
And it was settlers or something, and they buried them there. And it was basically they never had exhumed the bodies,
Yes.
and because they're worried about it being a continual health
Well,
risk.
let's just say you're not going to be digging a basement there.
That's a hell of a thing to read on a home inspection, don't you think, listeners?
You never know, right? Yes. In that same neighborhood, you remember we were looking at that historic home, and we went up, and it was really cool, and it had been rehabbed, and we went in the attic, and they had the old, like, raccoon skins.
I totally remember that.
All that, yeah.
Yeah, but that was creepy and cool because the house, it was blue, the house.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. It was Griswold, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
one of the founders of Old Worthington.
in 1806, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the original founders in in 1806. Say the house was built in 1805 or 7 or whatever. And obviously back then there was no, grocery store. So your grocery store was what was available in the local forest. And those skins and whatnot Julie's describing were original to the house.
Yes, which, I mean, honestly, probably leave those because that's okay.
And creepy.
I know. And, there are neighborhoods in Charleston, South Carolina, where the house actually sells for more, the more historic it is, meaning that you didn't put a furnace in and it's still on all those old fireplaces.
And a lot of the houses in downtown Charleston, which we've done before, if you guys, those of you who live in that area, you know what I'm talking about, the ones that are on the haunted house tours.
Haunted Charleston.
Yeah, it's funny too. I bet you some of those houses sell for more.
I bet they do.
There's a whole genre of people that look for haunted VRBOs.
I know.
There's
so many rabbit holes
that
we
is
can
some
go
kind
down.
of board.
It is. So, okay, is your listing one of them? Should it be? All right, so my number 6.
Does that increase the value or decrease? Depends on your market.
Know your comps. All right, number 6. Is this a competing offer situation? If so, how many offers? If not, what has the showing activity been? Does the listing agent have interest from their own buyers? What will it take to get the winning bid? What is the situation? Are there a whole bunch of showings set for this weekend? Are they going to do an open house this weekend? What is the time situation for getting this done? So is there a competing offer situation? Find out.
Let me inject something in here, Julie. So you might be in a situation where you know that the listing agent's trying to double in the house, and God bless them, that's their entitlement. That if it's the best deal for the seller, if it makes the most sense financially, certainly not anything unethical about selling your own listing to your own buyer. But here's the problem: your buyer and you, frankly, are going to be suspicious that your essentially your offer is not being presented in the full light of what the potential of it. You can write as a buyer's agent in the contract that the buyer agent is going to be the one that presents the offer to that listing agent.
You can do that.
Now, if it is not a confident listing agent, they're going to get very nervous about that. And I think in some states, Julie, you'll know more about this than me, can't you bypass the listing agent and present the offer directly to the buyer
You can
without
always
permission?
do that. In fact, one of my coaching clients who has had to compete over and over and over and just got sick of it, her strategy, which has worked, was to go old school with a paper contract.
Yep.
So let's say that I'm showing it, you're showing it, 2 other agents are showing it, the house is just crawling with showings, and I know it's going to be a competitive bid situation. There's also not much competing with it. So and your client is just dying to have it. So what do? You write it on, yes, that's right, with an actual pen on actual paper, and you put it in a sealed envelope, and you leave it in the seller's kitchen drawer, and you call the listing agent and you say, we are so excited about this house that we actually left an offer for your seller. Make sure they see it. And that's been very competitive and has worked because her market had become so competitive that by the time she got back to the office and turned it into a DocuSign, they had already lost.
Well, I personally, if I were selling real estate now, would I would convert everything to DocuSign for the sake of using the online CRMs.
You can still convert it later. Yeah.
But I absolutely would have paper contracts with me every single time because it gives you that sense of urgency.
Yes.
And there's also something a lot more, it's the delay, right?
Right. And to your point, how do you know the seller's really even seeing it?
Yep.
So that's one workaround for that in a nice professional kind of way.
Exactly. And, listing agents, Julie and I just told tens of thousands of agents out there that if you're being complacent and you're not presenting all offers and you're not returning calls to buyer's agents, that those buyer's agents in many cases are legally allowed to move past you, go directly to the seller to represent their buyer. So please heed this warning and make sure you're working your butts off to get the highest price and best terms for your seller every single time. And be respectful to the buyer's agents, guys, because in a marketplace like this, you're going to need the buyer's agents. You're not going to just treat them like, something to have to, overcome in dealing with all these offers. You're going to discover that for every 10 or 20 showings you get, you're going to have most of these agents that are showing the properties don't have the skill set yet to get the property in contract. Their buyers are going to be nervous about this, the other thing. But then you're going to start seeing there's very, very good buyer's agents. You will find out who those are when you're a listing agent, or just look in the MLS to see who's selling most of the houses. Befriend those people because chances are they're the ones that are going to bring the offer to your listing. And if you don't do that and you're adversarial like you many were in the previous market, you will find that the buyer's agents, especially the good ones, when there's competing properties, will not show your properties or not show them knowing that, with the same gusto, knowing that you're a pain in the butt to work with.
They might actually avoid you. I mean, that market is coming for sure. So don't forget about that, listing agents. All right. My number 7, is there a contingency plan if it's your seller? If it doesn't sell or doesn't sell for a certain price, you need to know if keeping the home is an option for them, or is this a must-sell situation? Again, that pre-negotiation checklist and the pre-qualifying checklist are all part of the Premier Coaching Program. And it's funny, I always tell the story to my coaching clients, and I think you'll remember this. What happens also if it does sell right away, but they didn't expect it? So do you remember the house that we sold in Chesterville, Ohio, in the middle of nowhere? In fact, we, having lived in Ohio our whole lives till then, had to look up where Chesterville even was.
And I'm going to tell you why I remember that. Because you and I have been in the business for 3 years or 4 years. And this lady was so freaking nice. And we'd known her. She came into an open house or somehow. We had a long-standing, very friendly relationship with her. And she called us out to list this property. It was just a little nothing house on a lake in the middle of nowhere.
It's like a cabin with 50 acres. It was very scenic, had a lot of trees.
50 acres?
Yeah, but the cabin itself was 800 square feet.
Yeah. So no comps, nobody in the, I don't even remember how to get there. I couldn't find it on Google Earth.
Well, you do because it was near Mid-Ohio Racetrack.
Oh, that's true. Now I do remember. That's right.
the only reason that you would remember.
Well, so we priced this thing, and it was seller's pricing. We overpriced this thing. And then the first 2 days, it sells. And it sells for full asking price. And here's what really got her going. It's another agent bought it for himself.
Yeah, and by the way, to date, that was the highest sale ever in Chesterville, Ohio.
How do you know that?
Because I did the CMA.
Because
I thought that it was very high.
To date then.
To date then.
Yeah.
Not to date now.
Forever in Chesterville, Ohio. It's called Chesterville. I mean, there's Chester and then, the little town he's founded in 14 people, okay?
Exactly.
So, yeah. And she was livid. And this little cute lady, I remember her because she just turned into a demon. Hunted us down, tracked us down, was stalking us.
It was on Easter. I remember that too.
Oh my gosh, she was so pissed off. And I remember her husband was he actually was oh my God, he was embarrassed how mean his wife was and how angry she was. And I think really what we'd stepped into was the resolution of a marital dispute that she didn't want resolved. And it was like, well, let's just put the house for sale. If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, we're just going to keep it
And
forever.
I don't think they expected it to sell.
And the husband probably wanted it sold, and she didn't want it sell. So in her mind, she worked out on all these conspiracy theories. In the meanwhile, we did exactly what we were paid to do. We sold the house for full asking price, and it closed. But those are funny situations.
But here's the coaching in that, right? You have to consult with your sellers. What happens to their plans if it does sell right away this weekend? And what happens to their plans if it takes a little bit longer? So that you don't get into a situation where you surprise them one way or the other. Because I think in our situation, she just hadn't really broken up with the house yet.
Sure.
You know, and it was a big emotional mess, and she didn't have enough time to work through all of that. When you have those conversations, well, you know, what would they do? What if it's a just amazing offer that we can't turn down, but they have to have possession a little bit sooner than you'd like? What are your plans? What would you do in that situation? I need you to be thinking about that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, just in case we luck out over the first weekend or two and we come up with an offer that you just shouldn't refuse.
This is going to be mind-boggling to some of you, but very, very rarely, aside from investors, is price the most important thing to a seller. Like, hardly ever. You think it is, you act like it is, but what you don't know is its convenience. It's hassle. That's what's most, Julie said, possession, right? These are the things you've got to know. These are the reasons that you have to learn how to negotiate. But what you really have to do is you have to have all the pre-qualification questions answered immediately. The first meeting with that seller, ideally on the phone, so you can absolutely positively know how to approach every single seller and get the property sold. Guys, this can't, hopefully you're seeing, I know you are, that skills give you an unfair advantage, don't they, right? More than anything else, more than marketing, more than branding. Because if you know how to put a deal together, and this other agent that has 16 billion followers on Instagram, they don't know your skills, they don't have your skills, you're the one that's going to put the deal together, you're the one that's going to get paid. If you're wondering why these agents that have no influence in your community, how they're the ones that are taking all the listings and selling all the houses, it's because they have skills. Get the skills. Right? Do the work, do the real work of real estate, and always lead with the idea that if you are wondering why it is that somebody has more than you, why they have what you perceive to be a better life, why they have better relationships, why they have better cars, houses, everything, why they have better clothes, why is it that someone has more money, wealth, income? Why? It's because what they have figured out is that the more people they help, in other words, the service they provide or the product that they sell, to accomplish the consumer's goals, solve their problem, the more of what they're going to want in life. The more successful an agent becomes, the more that agent is successful because they're not putting themselves first. They're putting the betterment of their client first. They're thinking about how can I make this person's life better. So when you see somebody that has what you want, don't be jealous of that person. Realize that that person has simply helped more people. That's the reason that they have whatever it is that you're feeling envious of. Do you guys get it? That is the truth about exactly what it takes to accomplish more and have more in life. Help more people. How do you help more people? You have to earn the right to help more people. That comes from having the skill set to solve the problem that they have, especially in a market like this. We are giving you the bottom line truth about what it takes to be successful in real estate or probably anything else in life. And I hope you're taking it seriously. Thank you for all the 5-star reviews on iTunes. Thank you for continuing to make this the #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate professionals in the United States. If you loved today's show, which hopefully you did, scroll to the bottom of iTunes right now, give us a 5-star review and leave a pithy comment. We love those pithy comments, especially when you are telling your story about what you learned from one of the past podcasts. A lot of you are longtime listeners. You've been listening to us for years, and you built your careers around what you've learned in this podcast. Please do reciprocate. Give us a 5-star review and give us a great comment. It means the world to us. In the meantime, guys, thank you for continuing to make this the #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. Have a fantastic day.
Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. And remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.